Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of A Little More Light. I am on my own today, flying solo. So you're just going to be hearing from me. So glad you guys are listening. Thank you for tuning in weekly. We know we have some of our loyal listeners out there, whether you listen to this, like we always say, in the car, cooking, at home, out for a walk, or you're catching up later on. We're just so glad that you guys choose to listen to A Little More Light, that you're encouraged by these messages and these episodes. And we just hope that we get to shine a little bit more light into your life so then you can go and shine a little bit more light into the lives of the people that you are around. So that's always our goal. Super glad that you guys are here. And basically today, I kind of just get to say whatever I want because Kevin's not here today. He is away. He's on a work trip right now. And instead of not doing the podcast and having another week off, you know what? We're just going to push through. That's the goal. So I decided that I was just going to take over today and talk about some things that we had going on in the last month. And I think it's going to be super insightful. It was really impactful for me. So without further ado, I'll just get right into it. We are going to be talking about our no spend month that we just had. Kevin and I, we did a entire month where we decided that we weren't going to spend any extra money. The only money that we could spend was on food and just the bare necessities. And then that was kind of what the plan was. And it ended up being really insightful and very convicting in a lot of ways. Also quite challenging to begin with, but really, really, really good. And so I wrote an Instagram caption about some of like 10 things that I learned about this and what my main takeaways were. And then I had a couple people message me saying like we should expand on this on the podcast. So I thought that we could just talk about this a little bit more in depth because on Instagram, you only ever get like the highlight reel of things. You don't always get the, I don't know, full story, I guess people would say. And so we can do a little bit more of a long form sit down. So I brought my notes today because I am on my own, try to keep this conversation flowing. But the first thing, we're just going to dive right into why we did this. So we travel a lot, and a lot of times, a lot of our money right now goes towards travel, and it can get really easy to, like, obviously when you're away, you have to buy food. And when you are constantly away, you can get into this habit of, oh, we need to like go grab food. Oh, I don't have my coffee machine here. I'm just gonna go get coffee. Oh, I forgot to like pack a shirt. I'm gonna like go buy a shirt. Oh, I need like a dress for an event. I'm gonna go do that. And I guess like I mean that's fine like when you're traveling, but then when we were finding that when we would come home that those habits that we have when we're like in between places also were happening when we were home, and that adds up over time, right? Like things right now are not cheap. Don't have to say that too many times. Everyone I'm sure will agree things are expensive, and we were noticing that we were just picking up and carrying some really like bad habits. And so we decided that because both of us were home for an entire month, we didn't have any traveling, he didn't have to leave for work, we were both in the same place, that we would set out to not spend any extra money. And so the things that we were allowed to spend money on were food, supplements, and anything related to his running. So if we needed more protein powder, if he needed more like gels, if he needed to buy a new pair of shoes because his shoes had over like 300 miles on them. And so like that was a necessity because he is training for a marathon. And then cleaning supplies, hygiene items, but nothing like extra. And so if I wanted like to get a new body wash, but I still had one, like I couldn't get that. If I wanted to get something for the kitchen, but like we kind of already had one or we had something like it, like we couldn't just go out and buy things. And so that meant no Amazon, no eating out at all, no coffees out, no like going to the mall, no clothes, no replacements of things, like just very minimum. And what I found was when we started, it was really challenging for me personally. I think Kevin did a little bit, had a bit of an easier job at it, but when I did it, and for the first, I would say 2.5 weeks, I found myself constantly thinking about, oh, I should go get this. And like my brain would just go to this, I don't know, like in like pre-trained response and was basically like, "Oh, you need that. Oh, you should go do that." And then I would stop and I'm like, "No, I can't go get that. I can't go get that." And so I think for me, the first 2.5 weeks, I was just really aware of how often I would just be like, "Oh, I want a bagel. Oh, I want to go and grab this. Oh, I'm coming home from the gym. Oh, I could get a coffee on my way home." But I couldn't. And I think that was really eye-opening, and I felt quite convicted at the amount of times I would easily just revert to wanting to go and fill a quick need or get a quick fix. And I'll dive more into that in a bit. But then by the third week and the going into the end, it was a lot easier just to make use of what we had. I was finding that I was a lot less, I think, stressed, or I wasn't seeking to fill like a quick hit or a quick need. I was a lot more content. I used my things that I had a lot more. I think I put more value in the stuff that I do have, and I was a lot more at peace, which is a crazy thing to think about. So I wrote down a few things that really stood out to me, and I'm gonna share them and dive into it with you guys now. So, whew, all right. Number one, the one thought that I did have that came throughout most of the week was we have more than we think, and we don't need as much as we think. I realized, and I would like to say that I knew this before, but I don't think I really thought much about it, but we have more than we think. Like, we are so blessed living in North America to have so much access to so many things. And I have more clothes than I need. I have more shoes than I need. I have money to buy food. Like, that's just such a gift. And so I think not spending my time thinking about all the stuff that I need and focusing on what I have really was super important. So we have more than we think, and we don't need as much as we think either. The second thing was that some desires are fleeting. So I realized this one day when I was driving home from the gym and I was craving a bagel from Tim Hortons. If you're familiar with Canada, Tim Hortons like is our thing. And I love bagels. Like, they're just super good. Cinnamon raisin all the way. And I was like, driving home and I was like, I can't stop. Like, I need to get home. Like, I can't go and buy this. Like, we're doing this thing. And so then I thought to myself, I was like, okay, well, you know what? Like, I actually have a bagel recipe saved on my phone that I've been wanting to try. I'm just going to go home and make them. And so I ended up driving home and making like a batch of homemade bagels, which were really good, saved me money, and was a good like use of what I had. And so when I say, what was it? Some desires are fleeting. It's amazing how quickly our brains think that we just need something and we want to go to that next hit. We want that next rush of fulfilling like a quick need. I think that's why, Amazon is such a, like, I guess, dangerous thing, because it's fulfilling this desire like instantly, like free shipping, overnight shipping, and even like streaming services where we're binging stuff, like those quick hits, or those things that we can just go to where we know that our needs are going to get met quickly. um Sometimes like those desires that we're chasing after, they're actually fleeting desires, but we're never going to realize that they're fleeting when we keep quickly trying to do everything we can to satisfy them. But instead, like, if you take a minute, sit back and say, do I really need this? Can I go home and make this myself? You realize that that desire that you had and that like urgency tends to diminish a bit, and you don't actually like desire that thing as much as you thought originally. So that was my second thought. I don't know if that really makes sense, but the third thing was that we do really have food at home. I know everyone says this, people joke about this all the time, but I noticed that I cooked more in this last month. I planned recipes more. I cooked throughout the day a lot more. And I'm not like, I don't love cooking. So it's not something where I'm like, I love being in the kitchen. I love like being a wife, all this stuff, making Kevin food. Like, I don't love it. I'm learning to love it. I'm learning to get better at it, but it's not something that I wake up and I'm obsessed about. And so what I really learned was that we do really have food at home, and it got us, I think, just to be more innovative with our meals. And we valued, I think, the food that we did have, and we used the stuff in the fridge. I heard this, I guess this, not a quote, what would it be, like a fact once, like someone did a survey, and they said that the average household throws away at least 30% of their food every week because we just don't go through it, we don't cook it fast enough, or we go out, we forget about it, and we're going off doing other things. So I found that we hardly like threw anything away, and the only things that we threw away were stuff that ended up getting pushed to the very back of the fridge, or like some fruit that was already kind of on its way out, but we just didn't have time to finish it. So those are like the only things that we threw out. So we do really have food at home. Now, the next thing was that we can make much of what we have when we get creative. So going back to my bagel example, we can make much of the things that we have when we get creative. So with food, we were looking through our pantry, we were looking through our fridge, we were looking through our freezer, finding ways to make new meals with what we had, and taking the time to look up recipes and doing things to get creative in the kitchen, because we weren't just going out, going to some cool spot, going to like what's trendy or what all our friends are doing, or what you would normally do on a weekend. Like, I think it was, we did this over Valentine's Day as well. And so instead of going out for a nice dinner, like Kevin looked up, a recipe, tried something new. I think we talked about it a few podcasts ago. It was good. Like, it was fine. And you would agree too. It wasn't like the best meal ever, but it was really sweet, and it was fun, and it was a good quality time. It was something that we were both committed to doing, which is staying home and keeping it low key, not spending money, not buying each other any gifts. And it ended up being really memorable. And another thing, so when we make much of what we have, I found that was the same thing with my clothes. So I love shopping, like love getting a new jacket, love, buying a pair of shoes, love keeping up with the trends and stuff. But I found that I was more intentional about wearing things in my closet that I hadn't worn for a while, and making new outfit like combinations that I hadn't done before. And that was just all like with clothes that I already had. So it almost felt like I had a bunch of new outfits because I was taking actual time to get creative with what I already had. So that was pretty cool. That was something I learned. Let's see. Oh, the fifth thing. Okay, I kind of talked about this already, that it's easy to depend on quick hits when we give into the temptation to fill our needs with material things. And so what I guess I could say with that is that having a no spend month is kind of like fasting. So fasting is when you're intentionally setting aside time to give something up and to not be as dependent on it. And so when we're giving up spending, like that was essentially fasting. And what fasting does is fasting spending suffocates your spending habits. I'm going to say that again. Fasting spending suffocates your spending habits. If you give up spending money on extra things, it will suffocate your spending habits. And that is a very good thing. Okay. So that is, I think, one of the best things, that if you have trouble shopping, if you have a spending issue, if you are poor with your finances, if you have a hard time saving money, fast spending on extra things for like a month, 2 months, whatever you need, because it will suffocate those bad habits. It's like cutting off the oxygen to those habits, and they just can't survive. Like, we can't survive without air. Our habits can't survive without our time and the energy that we're putting into them. And so if we're not investing ourselves into spending money, like, those habits will suffocate and die. And that is not a bad thing. So that's what I'm going to say about that. The next thing is that it's easy to believe the lie that we need to buy things to stay relevant. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this month showed me how easy it is to be influenced. I I'm gonna like I don't want to like call, like the kettle black or whatever they say that, whatever they say on like for that saying, but um I know that I can be seen as like an influencer, I guess, online where people look to you to say like, "Oh, like what are you promoting? What are you sharing? What are you wearing? Like what are you linking for us?" Um and granted, I only ever link the things that I actually love and that I'm actually obsessed with and that I use in my everyday life. So these are things that I could genuinely get behind if I was going to um, give someone, like, I don't know, advice or tell someone to buy a product. But I realized how easy we can be influenced because in a world of social media, in a world of everyone's trying to promote something, that we are drawn to the next best thing. Like we're drawn to the newest model of, let's say, an iPhone, a new car, a new laptop, the next book, or the next kitchen I don't know, appliance, the next fashion trend, the next makeup hack. Like we're drawn to those next, like those new and better things. And with influencer marketing, what that whole thing has done is it has greatly, I think, increased our desire to have more and to want to be like the people that we are seeing online. And I've noticed that when I wasn't spending money and I was like suffocating those habits, just the reality that we are so influenced by what we take in is such a relevant thing. Like there is a verse in the Bible that says like the eye is like a lamp to the whole body, and so what you're looking at is going to like come into you and light you up, or it's going to darken you. Okay, so it's like the eye is a lamp to the body. If you're looking at light things, like good and holy things, like you're gonna have light. If you're looking at like darkness, bad stuff, stuff that's drawing you away from the Lord, like your body's gonna be full of darkness. And I find like that's I don't know, I think that correlates to this. I'm not saying that like being an influencer, you're gonna lead people to darkness. Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. I love promoting stuff. I think it's great. It's a great way to connect. Not what I'm saying at all. But I think we do have to be careful at who we are influenced by, what we are taking in, what we are thinking about, and who we are letting influence us. Like if we are only looking at people who are trying to sell us things or who are trying to, you know, I guess paint this picture of this ideal life that looks really good on social media, but we don't know what it looks like behind the scenes. Like if we're only looking at that, I think that can be super damaging in the long run. And so this is just more just like, I guess, a call to reflect on what you are looking at, what you are letting influence you, and maybe just take a moment to think like, is this beneficial? Is this helping you? Like, whether it's saving money, having, I guess, contentment, which I'm going to get into more in a little bit, or if this is leading you down a path that maybe is not the best way for you to go. So this is, I mean, just a thought. Take it with a grain of salt. Take it if you want, but just think about it because I think it's really important. So the next thing is, this one's kind of funny. I guess I already said this. I don't need a new outfit. I can make new ones with what I have. I realize that I wear the same things over and over again. And I overwear some stuff. Like Kevin and I were saying that every time we get a new sweater, especially Kevin, I'm going to out him on this because he's not here to defend himself, but he will put a new sweater on and he'll wear it like 5 days out of 7 days of that week. Like it's like his favorite thing. And he becomes so obsessed with his new things. And then a week or two later, he like never wears it again, or very seldomly wears it again. And it's just like one of those cycles. And so we noticed that we don't need new outfits, like new pieces of clothing. We can get creative and make the new ones with what we have. And I have a lot of clothes. Like that's just plain and simple. Over this last year, I've been trying to downsize a lot. So every 3 months, I've been donating like 2 to 3 bags of clothes just to get rid of my old stuff, get rid of things that I don't want to bring when we do move to America. And it's been really nice because you're giving away clothes to someone who actually needs them. You're not throwing them out. They're going to get repurposed. It's good for the environment, all that stuff. And so, maybe for you, if you think that you have a lot of clothing, maybe just go through it. See if you can have some stuff donated. See if you can give some things away to a friend, sell them, whatever you want to do. But when you minimize how much you have, like all your options, I found it was easier also to figure out what I was going to wear because I didn't have as much. I think people say decision fatigue is what they say. So I didn't have as much decision fatigue, which was great. Okay, so the next thing, oh, this one's kind of funny. This is like, uh, okay, I'll just say this one. I make better coffees at home. I knew this before, but when you are not going to coffee shops to buy coffees, I spent a lot more time investing in the quality coffees that I have at home. And if any of you follow me on Instagram, you know that I love my coffees. I make coffee videos sometimes. Like, I feel like my content is spiritual. It's informative, but then it's funny and it's coffee. So that's what we got over there. But I was looking at more recipes online. I was going out to buy ingredients that I could make these new coffees like multiple times. Um, and I do actually make really good coffee at home. So hit me up if you want any advice on how to make a good espresso, cappuccino, iced latte, hot latte, Americano, cold foam, all that stuff. Shoot me a message because I will uh, hook you up. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this over to some scripture. So in Matthew 6, verse 19 to 21, Jesus actually talks about this very topic that we're talking about today. So I'm gonna back up all my points and this whole idea of fasting from spending, and we're gonna look at what Jesus says because I think this is just so cool when we are living life and trying to, I guess, be better people, be better followers of Christ, be more like Jesus, when Jesus actually has things about the topic that we're trying to tackle. So here we go. Matthew 6, verse 19 to 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moss and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moss and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so what we see is Jesus, he's talking about storing up our treasures in heaven instead of on earth. And our true inheritance that lies behind heaven's gates, so in heaven when we get there, is worth far more than anything imaginable. And so what he's saying is things on this earth, great. They're fine. They're cool. I've made them, have at them, but they're fleeting. And so instead of focusing on storing up all of our wealth, all of our material things, figuring out what else we need to buy, accumulating stuff is really what it is. Think about storing up your treasures on heaven. Think about heavenly things. Think about how to be a good neighbor, how to be righteous, how to be holy, how to serve one another, how to love one another, how to be kind, how to give back to the poor, how to help you in your community. Think about things that are lasting instead of material things. But thinking about all that, it's hard to remember all of that when our need for things becomes greater than our contentment for what we have. And again, I'm going to touch on that. I think living in a world like we do now, it's so hard to figure out how to balance like being content in what we have with the things that we do have and what is in our means to buy when we are bombarded by so many outside influences of get this, you don't have this, we'll upgrade to this. Hey, look what I'm wearing, buy this, this is the new trend. Oh, this is so last year, get this, get this. Like, we're constantly bombarded by that messaging. And so it can be super hard to be content with what we have. So that is basically why I'm recommending to have a no spend month. Like, take a look at what you have, what are your needs for the month, and only buy what you need and stop spending on all those extra things. And I really do think that you will be surprised. And I think maybe refreshed would be a word too. Surprised and refreshed of of how you can find actual contentment in the things that God has already given you. So that's my thought. And to build on that, I guess I should say the definition of contentment. Everyone out there's probably like, what's contentment? What is this? Or maybe you're just super smart and you know what it is already. But for those of you who are like, what's contentment? It is the state of being at peace and satisfied with what one has, regardless of circumstances. And so, having contentment and being in a state of contentment, it's not about being complacent or passive. Just like it's about trusting God's provision and being grateful for what He has given you. And similar to when we talked about waiting seasons as being active, not passive, that's the same thing with contentment. That contentment isn't something that you just sit idly by and you're like, well, I guess I'm not getting that, or I guess I don't have that, or, I'm going to make the best of that. I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to, thank you, God. I'm not going to want anything because I think like that sounds sinful. I'm just going to be happy with what I have. That's not what contentment is. Contentment is the state of being at peace and satisfied in the Lord, regardless of your circumstances. And that, like I was saying, is not a passive experience. It's not a passive action. It is active, because the way that we can be content is to be grateful, and to be grateful is, and honestly, it's an act of worship. And worship is an active thing where we are choosing to say, you know what, God, I am content in where you have me. I am content with what I've been given. I am content with where I am, and I am going to turn that, and I'm going to thank you for that. I'm going to worship you, for you provide for my needs, for you know what I need, you know what's coming, and you know all the days that are before me. And so I trust you. I thank you. I thank you for giving me what I have. I thank you for the things that you haven't given me, but the things that I know that you will provide for me when the time comes. And so all that to be said is contentment is an active response. It's choosing to trust God's provisions and worshiping Him for what He has done. And so that's not sitting quietly, idly in a huff, just, I don't need things, or blah, blah, blah. Yes, you don't need things, but it is a way to turn to the Lord and say, God, thank you for what I have. Help me to be content. And that is an active response. So here's another verse. 1 Timothy verse 6, 1 Timothy 6 verse 6 to 7. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. I think that's a really good thing to remember in a world where we're so achiever, achieve, get this, get this, get that, is that we came into this world with nothing, and we will leave when we go to heaven with nothing. Like, we come, as I think they say, like, we've come from the dust, and to the dust we will return. We don't bring anything into this world. Like, God has given us everything that we have. He has entrusted us. Everything that we have in our life is from God. He has entrusted us with those things. And when we die and when we go to heaven, all of those things that He's entrusted to us, we will be leaving behind. But at the end of the day, when we go up to heaven and God's like, what did you do with what I gave you? We're going to have to give an account for what we have done and what we had stewarded, and if we stewarded this things well or not. And so we're going to want to, at least I'm going to say, I'm going to want to be in this position where when I get to meet Jesus face to face, I want to be able to stand before Him and tell Him that what He entrusted with me with, I made much of. That I didn't squander it, I didn't waste it, I didn't make poor investments, I didn't neglect it, I didn't like just think about all the things that I didn't have and try to accumulate all this wealth and not do anything with. I want to be able to say that, God, what you gave me was enough for me and I made much of it. And so I think coming back to that, just even with that verse of each, no, where is it? Here. Oops, oh, there it is. For we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. Godliness with contentment is a great gain. That I think doing a no spend month really puts us in, like really puts that verse in the forefront of our mind, where we are pursuing godliness, not things at the end of the day. And sometimes we have to quench our bad habits. We have to starve them by fasting them in order to realign our perspectives in the right way. And when we do that, then I think we become more creative with what we have. We become more content, and we also become more grateful for the things that God has given us, instead of constantly giving into the desires that we don't have enough or that we need more. So that's what I'm going to say about that. And then I'm going to end with this. So that was in First Timothy verse 6, and the other verse was in Matthew 6. So I love that Jesus talks about in Matthew 6 not storing up your treasures in heaven, and to think about heavenly things, and to not focus on, basically what he's saying is he's like, don't focus all your attention on money and this stuff, like it's gonna fade away. Then Timothy says, or Paul says in First Timothy, he says, for we brought nothing into the world and we can't take nothing out of it. And then Jesus says a little later in Matthew 6, verse 25, he says, therefore I tell you, okay? Therefore I tell you, after all of this stuff on money, after all this stuff on wealth and whatnot, he says, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And then verse 34, he says, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And so I love that. I love that in the Word of God, we can look to the teachings of Jesus, and he tells us how to steward our possessions. He tells us what not to focus on, what to focus on, to not steal, or not steal, to not store our material things on earth, but to store up treasures in heaven where those things will last. And then he finishes by saying, and so do not worry. Like, I know that this world is hard. I know that it's tempting to want everything and to hold on to things too tightly, and to think that you are lacking, and to think that you don't have enough. But then he says, do not worry, because he is the one that is going to provide for you. He provides for the birds in the air. He clothes the fields with flowers and lilies, and they do not think about when the rain will come. Birds don't think about when their food is going to come next, yet God cares for them. And so how much more would he care for you and I, right? And so I think when we think about that, and we have that whole context of Matthew 6 in light of this topic of not spending our money on so many things, but quenching those I guess, bad habits that we have, it is such an encouraging message that we don't need to spend our time desiring those quick hits and fulfilling those needs that at the end of the day, when we come to the end of our life, aren't going to matter. Like the stuff that you accumulate, that all those things, like that's not gonna go with you. You can make much of what you have. You can invest it. Like, don't sit idly. Like, do the good work that you are called to do, absolutely. But just don't make that everything. Don't make buying things everything that you here's what I'm going to say. Don't make buying things everything. How do I say that? See, this is when you need Kevin here to like help bounce things off. This is so much harder on your own. But what I'm trying to say is don't don't make material things everything about yourself. You are so much more than that. You have so much more than what you realize. You've been gifted so much more than I think we realize. And when we can thank God for them, when we can be content with what we have, when we understand that we've come from nothing and we will leave with nothing, but we can make much of what we have while we are here on earth. And when we have that perspective, and then when we don't worry about what's coming tomorrow because we trust that God will provide for our daily needs, then I think we're in a lot better of a position. And I think overall we will live a more content life with the things that we have. So I'm rambling now. This has been a lot. You've been hearing just me, obviously. But I hope this was encouraging for you guys. This really opened my eyes to what I don't actually need and how to be content with the things that I do have. And if you do try this, let us know. I honestly think everyone should be doing this. We are actually, as a couple, we are going to be doing this at least 2 to 3 times every year just to reset. Probably just going to do it twice this year, and then we'll see the next year. But this is going to be a yearly thing in the Sikaner household to reset our minds, our priorities, and focus on the Lord and being grateful for the things that we have and quenching those quick hit desires because those desires are fleeting and they don't ultimately satisfy us at the end of the day. So thank you for listening. Hope this was helpful. Let me know if you try this, and we'll see you again next time on another episode of A Little More Light. Bye.